I could feel the tension between Beth and me as we drove back home after the party. The silence in the car was suffocating, and it was clear from her body language, arms crossed, lips tight, that she was beyond angry. She wasn't just mad, she was furious. And honestly, she had every right to be. I had completely ruined her night, something that should have been fun and exciting for her, and instead, I turned it into a disaster. How did I mess up? Well, it was simple. I grabbed the wrong key. But the real problem went far deeper than that. This wasn't just a normal party. It was something Beth failed to mention to me. She conveniently left out a rather crucial detail. See, the Parkers, our friends, hosted these strange parties every now and then, and this one had a peculiar twist. Every year, at the end of the evening, all the wives were expected to toss their house keys into a bowl. Each husband would randomly pick a key and spend the night with the woman whose key they drew, engaging in, well, let's call it discreet activities. That's the part one didn't know, the part Beth didn't warn me about. After 10 years of marriage, she suddenly decided that this little tradition was one she was willing to embrace, and to my shock, she didn't think I would mind. But when I figured out what was really going on, I was furious. My mind was racing, and my emotions were all over the place. I couldn't keep my anger in check. I grabbed her by the arm and pulled her into the kitchen, demanding answers. Did you know what this party was about? I asked, my voice cold with fury. She smirked at me, unfazed, and without a hint of regret, she confirmed it. Yes, I knew. But I didn't think you would agree if I told you, she said, calm as ever. I could feel my heart pounding, and I was struggling to keep control. You didn't think I'd agree? Well, you're right. I don't agree with this. I shot back, not even trying to hide my frustration. You think I'm just supposed to go along with it? That I'd share you with someone else? Not happening. Her argument came fast. It's just one night, Mark. It could bring excitement into our marriage, she said, her voice soft, almost pleading. I wasn't hearing any of it. I wanted nothing to do with it. I don't need this kind of excitement, I snapped. Let's just apologize, and we'll leave. Now. But Beth wouldn't budge. She wanted to stay. Please, Mark, just one night. I want to feel desired again. I'm not just a wife and mother. I need to feel something more. I could see the desperation in her eyes, but it only fueled my anger more. I had always been faithful to her, and the thought that she would willingly entertain the idea of being with someone else made me sick to my stomach. It wasn't just a minor thing. It was a betrayal, and it was a big deal. I'm not interested in sharing you, Beth. I'm not going to just sit back and let you do this. Ignoring her protests, I dragged her back into the living room where the other guests were gathered, awaiting their turn to pick a partner for the night. I wasn't going to let this go down without making it clear that I didn't approve. I marched up to the bowl, pulled out our key, my key, and raised it high for everyone to see. This marriage is sacred, I said loudly, looking around the room, and I won't condone this, whatever this is. The room was silent. There were some murmurs, some disapproving looks, but I didn't care. I turned to Beth, who looked like she might burst into flames, and I gave her an ultimatum. It's your choice, Beth. Come with me, and we'll leave. Or stay, and don't come home. I'm done with this. The tension in the room was palpable as everyone watched her. After what felt like an eternity, she finally spoke. I'm sorry for my husband's behavior, she said, her voice tight with frustration. I would love to stay, but I suppose it's best if I leave. She followed me out to the car, her face flushed with embarrassment and anger. As soon as we got in, she exploded. You're insufferable, Mark. How could you embarrass me like that, in front of everyone? She hissed. We'll never be invited to one of their parties again. I didn't care. What about how you embarrassed me, huh? You wanted to sleep with another man tonight, Beth. You wanted that, and you didn't even think to tell me. That's what you've done to me. The anger, the betrayal, it was all too much. I couldn't let it go. If it means that much to you, Beth, then fine, I said, pulling the car into a sharp U-turn. We're going back. As I sped away from the house, I could feel the weight of the decision settling in. I wasn't looking back, not even for a moment. The sound of the tires screeching as I pulled away felt like the perfect metaphor for my life at that moment. Everything was out of control, Everything had been shattered. Beth had made her choice, and I couldn't ignore it any longer. She was willing to throw away everything we had. And for what? A night with a stranger? A fleeting adventure? I wasn't going to stand by and watch as she walked all over our marriage. I looked over at her, still standing in the driveway, but I knew that was the last time I would see her standing there. The hope in her eyes, the naive belief that this was just some harmless adventure. It disgusted me. Her voice echoed in my head. It's just one night. But it wasn't just one night. It was a betrayal. And no, I wasn't going to play the fool. She wanted freedom, but I wasn't going to give her the freedom to break us. I didn't want any part of it. As I drove away, tears filled my eyes, not because of the loss of her, but because of the loss of everything we had built. Our family, our life together. It was all slipping through my fingers. I thought about the kids. How could I explain this to Natalie, Emma, and Mark Jr.? How could I face them every day when I knew Beth was out there, sharing herself with someone else? The thought of losing them, of not being there for them every day, cut deeper than any betrayal. The weekend was supposed to be a time of clarity, but instead, it felt like a slow, painful unraveling. I had the kids at my mom's place, giving me the space to figure out what to do next. I drove aimlessly for a while, hoping that maybe, just maybe, Beth would call and beg me to come back. But the minutes ticked on, and the phone stayed silent. It became clear that she had made up her mind. She was already too far gone. Just as I thought I couldn't feel more betrayed, my phone rang. My heart skipped a beat. Could it be her? No, it wasn't. It was Ted Mason, the guy from the party. He sounded smug, almost too happy to talk to me. Hey Mark, it's Ted. Beth gave me your number. She's really hoping you'll come back. She's excited for tonight. She wants you to join in. It's going to be unforgettable, man. I felt a surge of disgust. How could she talk about me like that? I wasn't some player in her twisted game. I didn't care what was going on in that house anymore. Hell with you, Ted. I spat into the phone. And hell with everyone there, including my wife. I hope you all get what's coming to you. I slammed the phone down, rage filling my chest. The betrayal had reached new depths, and I was done. I wasn't going back, not for anyone, not for anything. I grabbed my suitcases, packed a few essentials, clothes, my laptop, shaving kit, and threw them in the car. I searched the house for the one thing I needed to make this final, our marriage certificate. The piece of paper that represented everything we had once been was now nothing more than a symbol of what she had torn apart. I tore it into pieces. It felt strangely satisfying, but that wasn't enough. I picked up my wedding ring and, with all the anger I could muster, I hammered it until it was unrecognizable. When I was done, I placed both the ring and the shredded certificate on her pillow. It was over. There was no going back. I locked the door behind me and drove off into the night, leaving everything behind. I drove around aimlessly, my mind reeling as I tried to process everything that had just happened. I wanted to escape, to put as much distance between myself and the house as I could. I circled around town and found myself passing the Parker place again. The sight of the house with the few remaining cars parked outside only fueled the pit of dread in my stomach. I had expected to see Beth there, but she wasn't in sight. Maybe she was with her new adventure. Or perhaps she had ended up with Joe Parker himself. It didn't matter anymore. As far as I was concerned, everything had already fallen apart. The motel I eventually settled on was just a few miles outside of town. It wasn't much to look at, just a quiet, somewhat rundown place. But it had the privacy I needed. I parked the car, grabbed a six-pack of Newcastle from the convenience store next door, and headed to my room. I needed to numb the pain, just for a little while. The first 2 beers worked wonders, helping me unwind a bit. But when I opened the third, I felt a sharp sense of emptiness gnawing at me again. Then my phone rang, pulling me from my thoughts. It was Beth. I knew exactly what she was calling about, and I wasn't in the mood to hear her plead for forgiveness. I let the call go to voicemail. Mark, you're acting like a child. Her voice crackled through the speaker. Ted told me what you said. How many times do I need to tell you it's just one night? I'll let one guy have me for a few hours, and it doesn't make me immoral. Sure, it might sting a bit, but I'll make it up to you in ways you can't imagine when I get home tomorrow. I clenched my fist as her words continued. How could she even say that? As if I should be okay with it. As if I should just forget that she had gone and slept with someone else. She continued with her details, talking about Brian, the man she'd chosen for the night, and I felt my stomach turn. The audacity. She was telling me about their plans in such casual terms, as though it was no big deal, as though our marriage meant nothing. He's married with kids too, she continued, and he promised he wouldn't pressure me. We won't disturb his wife and her boyfriend, so everything will be fine. You know how vocal I get when you touch me. She laughed softly, and I could hear the satisfaction in her voice. I told Brian we should keep it simple, maybe stick to the usual positions. He's been with me a few times before, mostly missionary, but we might mix it up tonight. I promised him nothing new, Mark, just like the usual. He'll drive me home tomorrow, and I'll shower and freshen up before I come back to you. No leftovers for you, baby. Sweet dreams. Love you, Mark. Get ready for some excitement when I see you in the morning. Her message shattered me. It felt like a cold, brutal slap across the face. How could I have been so blind? How had I married someone so reckless, so foolish, so immoral? Sure, she had always been a bit scatterbrained, but I never thought it would lead to something like this. And now, here she was, flaunting it, making excuses for her actions, acting as if I should somehow understand. I should have ignored her message. I should have let it go, but I couldn't. My fingers trembled as I dialed her number again, and when she picked up, her voice was breathless. Hey babe, she cooed. Brian and I just got into bed, so I can't talk long. Shut up, Beth, I said coldly. This is the last time you'll hear from me. You have no idea what you've done, but you're about to find out. Enjoy your night with Brian, because when you wake up tomorrow, our marriage is over. Got it? You're finished. I could hear her voice falter, a hint of panic creeping in. Mark, where are you going? Don't be like that. I interrupted her, the words coming out sharp, venomous. I never thought I'd say this, but I hate you more than I ever loved you. Expect to hear from my lawyer next week. Before she could respond, I hung up, and my mind was a whirlwind of emotion. I couldn't even comprehend how she had brought me to this point. 30 minutes later, the phone rang again. I didn't answer. Let it go to voicemail, I told myself. But the damage had been done. I already knew. I could feel the hole it had created in my chest, a hole that would never be filled again. I stood in the diner, still holding the phone in my hand after listening to Beth's desperate voicemail. The words she spoke echoed in my head, each one sinking deeper into my chest. Just sex, she said. Just a few times. As though that made it okay. As though the betrayal, the destruction of everything we had built over 10 years, could somehow be reduced to something trivial, something casual. But I couldn't dismiss it that easily. Beth's voice, breaking with sobs, kept repeating how much she loved me, how she needed that special night to feel alive again, to feel desired. She claimed Brian had made her feel something she hadn't in years, the thrill of being wanted, of being desired by someone new. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She was a woman I had adored, and for all the years of love, affection, and dedication I had shown her, she felt it wasn't enough. My mind swirled with confusion and anger. How could she do this to me? To our family? How could she throw away everything we had built just for one night of passion with a stranger? I stared out the window, watching the traffic pass by as the weight of it all settled in. Beth wasn't just unfaithful physically. This went deeper than that. She had emotionally abandoned me and our children for something fleeting. And now, she was begging for my forgiveness, pleading for me to come back to her. The pain was overwhelming. How could I reconcile the woman I thought I knew with the one who was now calling her infidelity just sex? It wasn't just about the betrayal itself. It was about everything that came after. The lies, the manipulation, the selfishness. Beth was asking me to forget the destruction she had caused, to believe that she could just sweep it all under the rug and move on like nothing happened. She didn't understand that I couldn't forgive her. I couldn't look at her the same way after this. She had chosen someone else over me, over our family, and that was something I couldn't overlook. The idea that she could so easily turn to another man for validation, for desire, while I was right there, trying to make her feel cherished and loved. Well, it made me feel like I had never mattered to her at all. The fact that she had so little regard for the damage this would cause was the most painful part. She had destroyed our trust and broken the vows we had made to each other. I had never imagined that my wife of 10 years, the mother of our children, would do something like this. How could I ever look at her the same way again? I sipped my coffee, trying to steady myself, but the anger and sadness kept bubbling up, threatening to consume me. Beth was calling, leaving messages, begging me to come back, telling me that everything would be fine once I understood that it was just a night of excitement. But it wasn't just one night. It was everything we had worked for, everything we had built, thrown away for a fleeting moment of pleasure. I stood up, feeling the weight of the decision I had to make. The future of our family, my trust, and our lives were all hanging in the balance. But I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't go back to her. What she had done was unforgivable. I knew what I had to do next. I would hire the best divorce attorney I could find, someone who would fight for me, ensure that I got custody of the kids, and make sure Beth faced the full consequences of her actions. Mississippi law was on my side when it came to infidelity, and I was determined to use every tool at my disposal to make sure she didn't just walk away from this. The weight of the situation settled heavily on me, but I knew I had to push through. The kids needed me. I finished my coffee, stepped outside, and took a deep breath. I dialed the number of a lawyer I had heard about, someone tough, no nonsense, and known for specializing in divorce cases. This was it. There was no turning back now. Beth had always been a striking woman, shoulder-length dark brown hair, light blue eyes, and a figure that turned heads. Sure, her hips had widened a bit after having 3 kids, but she still got plenty of attention from men. So what was all this talk about needing to feel desired by someone else? I had shown her how much I loved and appreciated her every day. I brought her flowers, planned weekly date nights, and made sure to express my love and desire for her consistently. We had a good marriage, at least, that's what I thought. Our connection felt solid, and our sex life was fulfilling. We made love regularly, and it was always passionate and intimate. What had I missed? What had changed? I tried to push these thoughts aside as I entered the diner and found an empty table. I ordered scrambled eggs, toast, and black coffee, though I barely touched my meal. My mind was clouded with questions I couldn't answer. I must have gone through 6 cups of coffee before I could even attempt to digest what was happening. I had never felt so adrift, so empty, so utterly defeated. The weight of it all made me wonder why I even bothered going on. The only thing that kept me from sinking into despair was the thought of my children. I had to keep going for them. I had to find a way to move forward, despite the mess Beth had created. She called me nonstop that day, but I didn't pick up. Each voicemail she left was another twist of the knife. She pleaded for understanding, but there was never a true apology. She never admitted her guilt. Instead, she insisted that she just needed that one night, that it was a mistake, and that I needed to support her. She told me that she and Brian had only slept together 3 times that night and once in the morning, as if that somehow made it easier for me to forgive her. She even mentioned that she hadn't turned off her phone in time, worried I had overheard her talking to Brian. I couldn't believe how heartless she was. The only small consolation was that I now had enough audio evidence of her infidelity to use against her in court. It wasn't the smoking gun I'd hoped for, but it was damning enough. Tomorrow, I would put everything in motion. I needed a lawyer, and I needed to gather more information to make sure she didn't win this battle. That evening, I went to visit my kids at my mom's house. Beth had already called, asking where I was, and my mom had told her I was devastated and didn't want to speak to her. I could hear the tears in Beth's voice as she confessed she didn't understand why I was acting this way. My mom reassured her, saying that no man would accept his wife flaunting a night with another man. Beth seemed to break down further, and I felt a sick satisfaction, though it didn't change anything. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me anymore. The kids were happy to see me. I played games with them, had dinner, and kissed them goodnight. They asked where their mom was, and I told them she was busy with a special project. I wasn't ready to explain the reality of it all to them yet. For now, they were staying with Grandma a little longer. I couldn't let them see me broken. I had to keep it together for them. As I left my mom's house and headed back to the motel, I drove past my own house one last time. Tears welled up in my eyes as I stared at the house. the place where everything had once seemed so perfect. It struck me that I would never get that back. Something had been lost forever, and no matter what I did now, it could never be the same. It was strange that I didn't see any unfamiliar cars in the driveway. Maybe they were in the garage. Only one light glowed in the kitchen window, suggesting that Beth was alone tonight. For a fleeting moment, I wondered if she was regretting what she had done, but I quickly dismissed the thought. I wasn't going back. I found myself caring despite everything. The betrayal stung, but there was still a part of me that worried, against my better judgment. I parked a block away from the house and approached from the side where I could peek through the kitchen window. There she was, sitting at the table with an almost empty bottle of Grey Goose beside her. Her hair was a mess, mascara streaking down her cheeks, and she was wrapped in a robe. Her head rested on the table, her eyes closed, clearly exhausted from crying. It was evident she had been in pain, surrounded by a pile of used tissues. For a brief moment, I felt a twinge of sympathy, but just as quickly, it was replaced by the crushing memory of what she had done. She made her choices, and now she had to live with the consequences. I resisted the urge to knock on the door, unwilling to get sucked back into the mess she had created. Instead, I turned and walked back to my car, driving away with a small sense of satisfaction. Maybe, just maybe, she was finally starting to realize the magnitude of her actions. If she needed comfort, she could go to Brian, the man who had been part of her betrayal. Monday morning arrived, and I had a busy day ahead. After a restless night, I returned to the diner for breakfast, this time managing to eat my eggs, toast, and coffee. After finishing, I called my mom to check in with the kids and reassured them that I'd be home soon. Then I contacted my office, letting my assistant know that I'd be dealing with personal matters for the next 2 days. She asked if everything was all right, and I told her I'd explain later. During my last year at Ole Miss, I had roomed with 2 close friends, Doug Lewis and Leah McRae. We kept in touch over the years, though we didn't see each other often. Doug had studied business administration, and Lee had gone into law. I decided it was time to reach out to them for some advice. I called Doug first, asking if he and Lee could meet me for drinks later that evening. Doug agreed, and we set up a meeting at a beachside bar at 5 p.m. I arrived early and waited. Lee showed up first, followed by Doug about 10 minutes later. After a warm greeting, we settled at a table on the patio, ordered beers, and raised our glasses for a toast. "So what's on your mind, Mark?" Lee asked, his voice full of concern. "Your call sounded serious." I took a deep breath. Beth cheated on me, and didn't even try to hide it. I confessed, laying out the entire story. "That's rough," Doug sympathized, shaking his head. "I can't believe she'd do that." Lee added, "And without remorse?" "Exactly," I replied, feeling the weight of it all. "She thinks it's no big deal. So, I'm thinking about divorce, getting back at Brian, and, most importantly, getting custody of my kids." Lee leaned back in his chair, rubbing his chin. "Divorce is certainly on the table," he said thoughtfully, "but it won't be easy to get custody unless you can prove she's unfit as a mother. If she's bringing men around the kids, though, you've got something to work with. Otherwise, if she's a good mom, the courts will lean in her favor, and you'll likely end up paying child support." "I'm okay with that as long as I get to see my kids often," I said, feeling some resolve. Lee nodded. "The courts generally prefer both parents to stay involved, as long as neither is a danger to the kids." "What about the finances?" he asked, shifting the conversation. "Beth's a stay-at-home mom, and I'm guessing I make a solid income," I replied. "I have checking, savings, a 401k, an IRA, and a few other investments. Probably around $700,000 to $800,000 total." Doug chimed in. "Well, the court will likely split that evenly. Beth will probably get the house and custody of the kids, but if you can prove her infidelity, you might avoid paying alimony. Do you know a good divorce lawyer?" "I do," I said. "One of the partners at my firm specializes in family law. Her name's Sandra Simmons. Want me to set up a meeting?" "The sooner the better," Doug said. "I'll also look into ways to protect some of your assets," he added. "Send me all your financial details, and I'll get on it." We toasted once more, had a few more drinks, and then called it a night. For the first time in days, I felt a glimmer of relief. There was still a long road ahead, but at least I had a plan now. On the way back to the motel, my phone rang again. It was Beth. After a brief moment of hesitation, I answered. I realized I'd have to face her sooner or later, so I pulled over and answered. "What do you want, Beth?" I asked, cutting straight to the point. "What do you think I want, Mark?" "I want my husband to come home," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "Unfortunately, your little escapade with Brian makes that impossible," I replied coldly. "Don't say that, Mark. Please don't. You can't do this to me. It was just one night after 10 years. That's not grounds for divorce," I shot back. "Infidelity is most certainly grounds for divorce in Mississippi," I said firmly. "Why do you keep calling it cheating? It was just one night with someone new, just a fling. When a married woman has sex with another man, whether it's for one night or 1 second, it's cheating," I said. "I told you that if you went through with this, it would be over between us, and I meant it." Her sobs echoed through the phone. "Please, Mark, you can't do this to me." "You did this to yourself, Beth," I said coldly. "What the hell happened to you? Are you on some kind of drugs, or did you just have a complete mental breakdown? You didn't care about me, our kids, or what this would do to our family. You just had to have your night with Brian, and now you're going to face the consequences." "I never wanted it to be like this, Mark," she cried. "I didn't think I was hurting you. I just wanted to try something new. I love you. It wasn't about you. It was about what I needed." "That's what brought us here, Beth," I replied bitterly. "You put yourself first. You didn't think about me or our kids. You just thought about what you wanted, a special night just for yourself. Well, congratulations, Your Highness. You got your wish, and it ended your marriage. It probably also ruined your reputation with your family and friends. Maybe one day I'll forgive you, but I'll never forget. And I'll make sure everyone knows what you did, just like you mocked me for being upset about your affair. Let's see how you handle it when everyone hears your confession. How many times were you with Brian?" "Oh God, Mark, please. My parents would be devastated if they found out," Beth cried. "Too bad, Beth. You should have thought of that before you made your bed. Now you've got to lie in it. You act like this was no bigger deal than getting a parking ticket or forgetting to return a library book. You threw away a solid 10-year marriage with a man who adored you for a night of cheap thrills with a stranger who only cared about his own pleasure. Does it feel good, Beth, that Brian slept with you 4 times and it cost you your family?" "I didn't have to lose anything, Mark," she shot back. "You should have loved me enough to support me and let me do it. Are you out of your mind? There isn't a single sane man on this planet who would support his wife having an affair just because she wanted to try something new. It doesn't work that way, Beth, and you should have known that. What were you thinking when you did this?" "I didn't expect you to be this upset," she admitted. "I mean, seriously, Mark, what's the big deal about letting another man have me for a night? It doesn't mean I love you any less. I've heard about couples hooking up at the Parker parties, and it intrigued me. Why can't a husband or a wife have a fling with someone nice and safe, enjoy the experience, and explore new sensations?" I stared at the phone in disbelief as she continued. "I just wanted to experience another man's touch. It didn't mean I loved you any less, Mark. It just meant I needed something different, just once. Then I would have committed myself to you again and never done it again. But that meant you didn't respect me," I said, my anger boiling over. "I begged you not to do it over and over again, and you just smiled and said, 'See you in the morning.' Mark, you took away what we had shared for over 10 years, the vows that meant everything to me. Clearly, they meant nothing to you. We created 3 beautiful children out of the love we had. We were a family. And now you've willingly given that part of yourself that made our children to another man for what? A good time? A one-night stand? It was just one night," she repeated. "And you need to accept that and move on." I shook my head, frustrated beyond words. It was nothing less than a complete betrayal of me, our family, our sacred vows, and any respect you ever had for me. You wanted to be with another man, and you did it. Congratulations, Beth, but in doing so, you threw away everything you supposedly valued." She was silent for a moment before blurting out, "Damn it, Mark, why are you being so stubborn? Why can't you understand that it was just something I needed? I'm yours forever. Nothing has changed." Everything's changed, I said bitterly. You're not just mine anymore. I don't understand why you can't see that. I pleaded with you not to do this, and now you expect me to forgive and forget? You betrayed me willingly, and this pain will last a lifetime. I took a deep breath and continued. I found a lawyer. Tomorrow, I'm filing for divorce, citing infidelity. I'll name Brian, and I'll name anyone else from your party I can identify. Imagine their reactions when they find out you're responsible for breaking up their little circle and ruining their reputations. Go to hell, Beth, and take your cheating friends with you. The moment I met with Sandra Simmons, ESQ, I knew I had the right attorney. She didn't waste time with small talk and got straight to business. She asked me why I wanted a divorce and what I hoped to achieve. I told her I wanted to split our assets, offering Beth the house in exchange for less cash. I knew I likely wouldn't get full custody of the kids, but I wanted unrestricted visitation rights without having to pay child support. I also gave her all the audio evidence I had of Beth confessing to sleeping with Brian. Sandra shook her head in disbelief. Your wife was careless, admitting to her affair in a way that could be used against her in court. We may need a voice recognition expert to confirm it's her voice, but unless we end up with an extremely biased judge, this recording should hold up in court, she said. We spent the next hour discussing my plans regarding Brian and the other participants from the wife-swapping event. Sandra doubted we could get any monetary compensation from them, but she suggested we could expose their activities and shame them enough to cause serious damage to their reputations. I agreed that would be enough for me. After giving her a deposit, I asked that Beth be served as soon as possible. Sandra assured me it wouldn't take long and promised to let me know before it happened. On Tuesday afternoon, I picked up the kids from my mom and took them to Beth's house. When she greeted us at the door, she hugged and kissed the kids warmly. But when she reached out to me, I stepped back. Tears welled up in her eyes as she pleaded with me to stay, but I told her I couldn't. I thought it was best for the kids to return home to her. I arranged to pick them up on Friday for the weekend. Beth looked like she was struggling, and part of me sympathized with her, but she had made her choice. Her distress was no worse than what I was going through because of her actions. On Wednesday, I went back to work, realizing I couldn't afford to neglect my job. I needed the income, but even more so, I needed the distraction. If I allowed myself to drown in the pain of Beth's betrayal, I'd lose my mind, and I couldn't do that. Not with my kids depending on me. That Thursday, I met Doug and Lee for dinner at the Oyster House. We talked over shucked oysters and dirty martinis, and I updated them on the kids and the divorce. Doug was still looking for ways to protect some of my assets, and I gave him the green light to proceed. It wouldn't be much, but it would help in the long run. We came up with a simple plan to disrupt the wife-swapping club without risking any slander lawsuits. We had a friend who worked as a reporter for the Boyson Herald. He was confident that if I provided him with the address of the Parker house and the approximate time the group met, he could expose them. He planned to write an editorial about the wife-swapping scene, hinting at the involvement of local businesses without naming names. This would stir up enough trouble among the city's religious crowd to cause real problems for the group. I gave Lee what little information I had, and he said he'd take it from there. We shook hands and parted ways, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of relief. The weekend with my kids was wonderful. We went shopping, caught a movie at the Grand 18, and spent a day at the beach, swimming and playing frisbee. My children were my #1 priority now, and I swore I'd do whatever it took to protect them from the mess Beth had created. I would never abandon them. On Monday, Lee called with good news. His reporter friend was already working on the story and had taken photos of couples entering the Parkers' house. Though their faces would be blurred, people in a town like ours wouldn't take long to figure out who they were. We said it could hit the front page by the end of the week. Beth continued to call me, pleading for me to come home and promising she'd do anything to make me forget her actions, but she never apologized. Not once did she admit she was wrong. By Wednesday, my lawyer informed me that Beth would be served with divorce papers on Friday. Doug also called with more good news. He had managed to move about a third of my money into accounts under my children's names, protecting it from any future claims. That same day, Lee told me his friend had staked out the Parker house and was ready to get more photos at the next wife-swapping event scheduled for Friday night. He also wanted to interview me for the article. I agreed. feeling a sense of closure starting to take shape. On Friday, my lawyer called around 2:30 to confirm that Beth had been served. I knew what was coming next, and sure enough, my phone rang within minutes. "Hi, Beth," I said calmly, knowing exactly what she wanted to talk about. "What did you do, Mark?" she demanded angrily. "I filed for divorce, as I said I would," I replied, keeping my voice level. "And I told you there will be no divorce. Spending one night with another man isn't cheating, Mark," she cried, her voice cracking. "I have to disagree," I said firmly. "Having sex with someone other than your spouse is infidelity. That's how the law sees it, and that's how I see it." Her tears were almost palpable through the phone. "Why are you so angry with me, Mark? I love you. Brian and I had an affair, that's all." "An affair is an affair, Beth. You had sex with another man. You betrayed me, and now you'll face the consequences. Goodbye, Beth. I hope you have a nice life." With that, I ended the call. The hardest part of all this was that, despite everything, part of me still loved her. I knew that feeling might never go away, but the trust was shattered beyond repair, and that meant our marriage was over. Even though I knew I should stay away from the Parkers' house that Friday night, I couldn't resist the temptation. I wanted to see if Beth's car would be there. To my relief, it wasn't, but I knew she would have arrived with someone else. While couples were usually required to attend together, I knew they had made an exception for her before, and who's to say they wouldn't again? I parked a block away, noticing a van that was likely housing the reporter. I silently wished him luck as I drove off into the night. Later, Lee's journalist friend called for more details, which I was happy to provide. He mentioned he had captured over 100 photographs and had already recognized several prominent couples in the city. He said some people didn't even bother hiding their identities. After confirming that Beth wasn't among the attendees, he asked me to describe the key-swapping process. While I hadn't seen it firsthand, I relayed Beth's account and what I'd overheard from other couples. By Sunday, the article hit the front page of the Boyson Herald, sparking outrage across the city. The paper featured a large photo of couples entering and exiting the house. Their faces were blurred, but easily recognizable by their clothes or cars. Inside, there were 4 more pages of photos and a detailed write-up. The city was buzzing by Monday morning, with local radio and TV stations discussing the scandal. For me, it was a bittersweet victory. The religious community had erupted in protest, civic leaders condemned the city's tarnished reputation, and lawsuits were flying left and right. But all I could think about was the pain I had endured because of Beth's betrayal. Beth continued to try to reconcile, but her attempts were futile. Our divorce was finalized, granting joint custody of the kids. She had them on weekends, and I had them during the week. It wasn't ideal, but it worked in the end. I spared her the humiliation of sharing the audio of her confession with her family and friends. As for the couples involved in the key parties, some divorced and moved away, while others simply vanished from the social scene. Beth started dating again, but it was clear she still didn't understand why what she had done was so unacceptable. I dated a few women, but never found anyone I was ready to settle down with. Some wanted to move in, but I wasn't ready to hand over a key. Should a one-night affair ever be considered a deal-breaker in a marriage, especially when one partner insists it was just about feeling desired again? Can infidelity, no matter the circumstance, ever be forgiven? Or is the trust irrevocably broken? What happens when betrayal doesn't just affect the couple, but also involves friends and family in ways that can't be undone? How far should one go in seeking revenge when confronted with a spouse's infidelity? What lines should or shouldn't be crossed? Does the public shaming of those involved in extramarital affairs serve any real justice, or does it just make the situation worse? Should the betrayed partner always take the high road, or is it sometimes justified to expose and punish the ones who caused the heartbreak?